So, welcome to the another episode of Be Remote podcast. I'm your host Pushpak, and for today's episode, we have with us Kate Smith. Kate is a remote career coach. Welcome to the show, Kate. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good too. I'm doing great. Yeah. So, let's begin with the introduction about you and what you do as a remote career coach.
Yeah, for sure. So, I do just that. I'm a remote career coach, which means that I help people who, want to leave the 9 to 5. They don't want to work in an
Mm-hmm.
office. They don't want to work at a cubicle anymore. They
Right.
want the freedom and flexibility so they can essentially live more life and live life on their terms. So I help them and I guide them through the process of how to land a
Mm-hmm.
remote job. So I'm not a recruiter. I don't match them to jobs. I teach them the skills
Okay.
of how to, create an optimized LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
where to look for these opportunities, how to stand out, so that they can create that lifestyle with more freedom and flexibility, and just supporting them through that process.
Awesome. So, what made you, go into this journey as a remote career coach?
Yeah. So you're ready for a story? Here we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
I think it will be helpful to share my story of how I personally
Mm-hmm.
got into remote work,
Mm-hmm.
because that sort of led into what I do now. I never in a million years thought I would be doing this. I never
Okay.
thought that this would
Mm-hmm.
be, the direction I take in life. But to me, having personally gone through the journey of leaving a corporate 9 to 5,
Mm-hmm.
finding a remote job and being able to travel the world, have that freedom, that really that process I'll get to it, but needless to say, I wanted to share that with more people. I wanted more people to experience the freedom and
Mm-hmm.
flexibility that I
Right,
was
right,
able
right.
to achieve. So, in terms of my story and how this all got started, I grew up in a very traditional, I led a very traditional life. I'm from
Mm-hmm.
Canada, a small
Mm-hmm.
town in Canada. I went to university. I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Right, right.
Played by the rules of society, so to say. Got a corporate 9 to 5 at the time. It was my dream job at an
Mm-hmm.
advertising agency, which was really cool and exciting. But then after a few years, I was just so burnt out. I was exhausted. And I just thought, this really can't be the rest of my life.
Right, right.
And so I knew I needed to make some changes. And so I decided that I was going to save up to quit my job. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew three things. I didn't want to sit at a cubicle all day. I
Mm-hmm.
needed to make money because I had student
Yeah.
loans to pay. And I wanted to be able to travel. So essentially, I wanted to get paid to travel, which was pretty impossible. But I
Mm-hmm.
thought, okay, let's give it a go and see what happens. So as I was getting closer to my quit date of my 9 to 5, I actually got pulled aside by my boss, and I actually got let go. And so at that time, to me, I saw that as a huge opportunity, as a sign of like, you're ready, let's do this. So I spent some time trying to figure out, what my path would be and what it would look like. And that's when I came across this concept of remote work. I actually came across a program called Remote Year. I'm not sure if you're familiar
Yeah,
with
yeah, I heard
Remote
about
Year.
it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
for those who don't know, Remote Year takes a bunch of people who already work remotely, already have remote jobs, and you just travel around the world for a year together. So I saw that program and I thought, this is it. Like, this is my path. This is meant
Right,
for
right.
me. So I put my savings down. I think it was like 3 grand at the time US
Mm-hmm.
to join this program. The only problem was I didn't have a remote job. So I was trying to find a remote job, trying to find a remote job. And I'm the type of person where if I give 100% effort and just like full out try first to achieve something,
Mm-hmm.
usually it pans out. This was the first time I was putting in 100% effort, really giving it my all, and nothing was working. And I
Mm-hmm.
really started to just doubt myself and think, okay, like what this just isn't working. So
Right.
anyways, my time is coming to join Remote Year. So I booked a one-way flight to Prague. I had enough money to last me the month. And then
Mm-hmm.
after that, it was like, okay, I'll have to go back to Canada if I can't figure this out. So I had tried to find a remote job for months in Canada. At the
Mm-hmm.
time, I didn't realize I was approaching it the wrong way. Get to Prague. I have about 4 months to figure out this remote job. Um, and during my time in this journey as well, there was a point in time too where my laptop died. And I just thought, like, I remember being in the grocery store crying, thinking like, okay, this is it. Like, this is just not working out. Like, I've tried so hard and all these things are against me. But luckily, before the month was out, I landed a fully remote job doing marketing. So before I did project management, this role was in marketing. And it really happened in a really organic, natural way. I was working at a co-working space. We decided to go for lunch with some locals. They had a friend that was looking for someone in marketing, and it all just sort of panned out. So I was able to spend that year traveling on remote year, working remotely. And at that time, I started a blog just to really share what I was up to and what I was doing. And the blog just really, people were starting to notice what I was doing. So I got picked up in press, BBC, Fast Company, a bunch of, major publications. And people were reaching out, being like, this is really cool. I love what you're doing. How do I get a remote job? And so I'd get on these calls with people for like an hour, and it wasn't enough time. And I'm trying to explain like, okay, here's how you can get a remote job. And that really inspired what I do now, realizing like, okay, there is a demand. People are confused how to make this happen. It can be very daunting because it's so unknown. Right. When it comes to a 9 to 5, okay, people, even that process can be overwhelming and challenging. But when you look at a remote job, it's so different. And so, after having spoke with so many people and having so many people reach out, that's when I realized, okay, maybe career coaching is a path for me. And to me, it's just such a fulfilling career. And I never imagined I would be doing this, but to help people create that same freedom and flexibility that I have, that's what I do it for, so that people can just live more life and live a more fulfilling life. And that's what it's really about at the end of the day. It's not so much about the job, it's about the lifestyle you're creating.
Yeah, makes sense. So since when did you started working remotely? Like when all these things happened?
Yeah, this was over 6 years ago. So when I started, it was like nothing on Google about how to land a remote job. It was so different at that time. And now there's almost an overabundance of information out there that can get a bit overwhelming.
So how to how do people find a remote job? Like if our listeners listening to our podcast right now, so how should they go about this, finding a remote job, especially right now? Like I think a lot of companies now provide remote jobs after the pandemic, but I think there are some companies who are planning to go hybrid or go back to offices. So how do someone find a remote job in 2021?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a pretty loaded question. Again, there's a lot to it. I'm going to do a little plug here. I have my Remote Career Accelerator program launching soon. So if you head over to the Remote Nomad, you can get on the wait list. But to give you the most, simple, basic breakdown in specific steps, I would say step number 1 is getting really clear on your career path, because that's going to guide every single decision that you make. It's going to determine how you communicate on your resume, LinkedIn, networking. The reason this is so important, what I notice with people, the biggest mistake they make is they want a remote job so bad. So they kind of grab at anything, like, I'll take anything, I'll do anything. And their resume is just a splatter of a bunch of skills, and someone can read it and get really confused of like, I don't really know how you add value to the company, because you're trying to say you just do everything, right? And so getting really clear on that career path is really important. It's going to determine and dictate, the rest of the stuff that you do. So career path clarity is really, really important. And then you want to create high value visibility, what I call high value visibility. And this is all about controlling the narrative of how you and your skills are perceived. And now this will follow into, creating a resume specific to remote jobs, an optimized LinkedIn profile. So creating that high value visibility. Another component of it as well is a lot of mindset. So a lot of people, I see so many clients where so many of them doubt themselves, doubt their skills, doubt that they even have what it takes. And they're eliminating themselves before they even give before they even apply to these opportunities, or when they are applying, they have so much self-doubt that it's coming through in their applications. So really creating that high value visibility and understanding how to effectively communicate your skills and value, even if you've never worked remotely before. So we have that. And then we have what I call the unicorn application. And this is really about how you can go above and beyond to stand out in the application process. A lot of people are just sending out the same resume to a bunch of jobs, crossing their fingers, hoping they hear back. But really, it needs to be, with your resumes, they need to be tailored and really taking an approach where, again, you can stand out from those candidates so that regardless of how many people are applying, you're putting yourself in the top applicants by taking what I call, again, the unicorn application to stand out among everyone else. So those are some of the things that you need to consider, and really just creating a strategy instead of trying to just almost like shooting an arrow in the dark, right? And like trying to hit a target. Like it's dangerous and you're going to exert a lot of energy. So really staying focused with the job search, putting a strategy in place, a timeline, understanding what actions to do, the right steps to take and in the right way. And again, with the career coaching, that's essentially my job, is to take clients through that process one step at a time, so it's less overwhelming and so that they can actually start getting those results.
Yeah. I think the best way or what our listeners should do is just reach out to you and take a help from you only. That would be better for them.
Yeah, I do have free resources too. If you go to the remotenomad.com /free gift, I have a bunch of free resources. So if someone's, trying to get started, I have a playbook there that takes everyone through the process in more detail, like I just shared with you now.
And this is for like everyone, right? Like if you are in marketing, finance, or like anything basically, which could be like if you could help a tech company, like mostly tech companies are remote, right? So like are there any specific skills that which you really need, or like how can with what kind of skills you can apply basically?
For sure. So the way that I best explain this is that when you teach somebody how to lay bricks, right? You teach them how to lay bricks, they can build a skyscraper, they can build a house, they can build a garage, they can build whatever they want once they learn that skill of how to lay bricks. So that's sort of what I teach my clients, the skill of how to land a remote job. So that can apply to any industry or space. It's really understanding that the principles and the foundation. So I've even had clients go from working in jobs that are where you need to be really physically based. So I had one client, for example, that was an automotive technician and postal delivery. I think I don't know if he was a driver. He worked in the postal delivery and he made a transition to a fully remote customer support role. So again, even if you have this job or this career where you have to literally be physically present, you can still make that transition as long as you know how to effectively communicate your value, your skills, and that's all clear when you're applying.
Got it. So how was your initial days of working remotely, right? Like, so you said you went to remote area and then you like from there on you started working remotely. So like, did you came back to Canada or you just traveled the entire world while working? How was that experience?
Yeah. So when I first started, my expectations were like very low, very, very, very low. Okay. All I knew, I thought on remote year, we'd all just be in a hostel, literally working from our beds. Like my expectations, I had no knowledge of what was going to happen. Yeah. And that helped because I had no expectations and low expectations. It was so much more than I could have imagined. As time has evolved, obviously my expectations of certain things have evolved. I have specific needs. I need to ensure I always have great Wi-Fi. I need to make sure I have those basic, for me is basic needs met wherever I go. So the program was, we spent a year going to a new country every month for a year. And it was an incredible experience. I explain it that I experienced about 5 years of growth packed into 1 year. By the end, I was exhausted though, and I knew that I needed slower travel. I needed to stay at a place longer than 4 weeks. Or I would say about 3 weeks is about the time where you start getting comfortable with a place of like, okay, I know where I'm going to work. I know where the grocery store is. But I think, for a lot of people that are new to this, they assume like, oh, I'm going to go to this country and I'm going to do all this traveling. But it's like, you still have to work full time during all of that. Right. And so I find a mistake that a lot of, newbies will make is they try to pack too much in to too short of a time. They don't give themselves enough time. And the way that I kind of explain this is like, imagine working, just wherever you are now, a full-time job, and going out every single night, every single weekend. It would be exhausting. And so
Yeah,
you still
exactly.
need that balance.
Mm,
So that sort of led me to Bali. So when I was on remote year, I took a side trip to
mm,
Bali. I was going to go for the weekend for my birthday. I fell in love. I ended up staying the month. And I always told myself, okay, as soon as I'm done remote year, I'm going back to this place. This
mm.
place feels like home to me. There's such a big digital nomad community there.
Yeah,
So I've ended up spending about a year and a half on and off living in Bali. Obviously, now things are a bit
yeah,
unique
yeah.
given the world
Mhm.
situation. So I
Right.
haven't been back in some time. But yeah, so then I spent some time there. I've spent time in Canada. It really just kind of depends what season I'm in life. Remote year was
Mhm.
very intense. I came back to Canada for about a year. Again, on and off to Bali for a year and a half. It was a bit much slower. And right now I'm in Canada.
Right. So, like you said, like if we are working remotely, then we could have a flexible lifestyle, basically, right? But how do we know that those remote companies, won't give you a lot of work, right? Because like a lot of people have experienced burnout while working from home in the pandemic, right? So how do we solve this problem? How do we really find the companies who are giving you a work-life balance?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's important to note, first of all, I've been working remotely for, again, over 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I had to work from home during a global pandemic, it was even an adjustment for me and was hard. And so I think many people may have this misconception that this is what remote work is like, and it's not.
Yeah, yeah.
We
Mm-hmm.
don't have the health scares, we don't have the restrictions, we're not stuck in the same location. Typically, I'm working from co-working spaces, cafes, I'm working from different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And although we've made a step forward with remote work by allowing people to not have to come into the office, I don't think everyone's experienced the full benefit and extent that remote work has to offer, which again
Yeah.
is like that
Mm-hmm.
ease of travel, and that creates more life balance because you're working in places where you're most inspired, where you
Mm-hmm.
feel, your best. In terms of, having that freedom and flexibility and finding the right remote company, the work is it's not about working less. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to work like 20 or 30 hours
Mm-hmm.
and I'm supposed to be working 40. You'll still work full time, but what a lot of people, in terms of having the ultimate flexibility, looking at the difference between if a remote company is synchronous or asynchronous. So the difference being is that one is where it's like, hey, we're remote, but you need to be online 9 to 5. So you're
Mm-hmm.
still technically working those hours.
Right.
Where other remote companies, it's sort of like, hey, just get your work done. I don't care how or when you do it, just
Mm-hmm.
get it done. And
Right.
they may have some overlap time, like, hey, between these 2 hours every day, just be online in case we need to have team meetings.
Right.
So when
Right.
I was working for a remote team, that's how our setup was. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
just get your stuff done, hop online between these hours and these hours, like a couple hours a day, just so we
Mm-hmm.
can check in if we need to. Otherwise, you're kind of on your own to get the work done.
Right.
So really looking at if a remote company operates synchronously or
Mm-hmm.
asynchronously um, would be really important.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, makes sense. So, what do you think about the future of work and 9 to 5 job? Like, do you think like there won't be 9 to 5 jobs anymore? And there's a freelance economy is also becoming the gig economy. A lot of people are getting into freelancing, and the remote work actually kind of pushes the freelancers. So, what do you think? How do you see the future of work and 9 to 5 and everything?
Yeah. Well, as a huge remote work advocate, I think offices are the most ridiculous waste of money, obsolete thing that we could ever have. So I would love to see a world where the cubicles in the offices don't exist. I think it's unnecessary. It's a
Mhm.
waste of money, space. It doesn't allow people to work where they thrive. Like, we're all different, right? So
Mm.
you may work better working at night. I may work better, working in the morning. Like, we're
Yeah,
all
yeah.
different. The temperature of the office, like I remember freezing in the office, right?
Mhm.
Like, everyone has their different needs. So this
Right.
allows employees to work when and how they operate best for optimum productivity. So in terms of the future of work, I think that we're in a positive direction. The silver lining of COVID has been that we've progressed probably 10 years, would have taken 10 years, happened in about a year. There are a lot of companies resistant to remote work, but then with COVID, they kind of had to decide, do we need to do this to survive or a company dies? So they had to adapt in order to survive. So that's been, I guess, a silver lining blessing of COVID is that, again, what would have taken probably 10 years has happened in a year. It has accelerated. So now as we move forward, I think what we'll start to see once things start opening up is more of this movement across borders and exploring perhaps this digital nomad lifestyle where people have that, where they can, maybe they have family in a different country, they can go visit them and just bring their work with them to really experience the full benefit of working remotely. I think we'll probably see an increase in co-working spaces. Again, co-working spaces being set up in a way that works best for you to connect with like-minded people that aren't necessarily your colleagues. So I think that we'll continue to see companies adopt that remote work model, really see the benefits. There is a learning curve, and I think a lot of companies are experiencing that learning curve right now. So I think a lot of this process will get formalized. And I would love to see governments in time really embrace this as like a right for employees. Like I have people come to me where they have health issues and it's just easier for them to be at home than go into an office. And so I think we'll see some shifts. I think Germany implemented something around that already. I think we're going to see definitely even more digital nomad visas. So the pandemic, all of these countries are like, we want to attract remote workers. So they start offering these digital nomad visas. And so I think that's a positive step because it means that governments are recognizing that this is a real thing. And they're starting to put in policies that make that more clear. So as a remote worker, when I'm going to Bali, there's a bit of a gray area because it's like, okay, I'm not working in Bali, but I'm not a tourist. Like, how do I enter this country? I want to make sure I'm following all the rules, but it's this huge gray area. So by formalizing it, digital nomads are really clear on like, okay, I get the digital nomad visa. That accommodates my situation.
So how does this digital nomad visa works?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm excited to share that I worked with Estonia on the first digital nomad visa. And so during that process, when we were creating it, one of the challenges was defining digital nomad. Like, how do we define this and how do we word it in a way where people can't just like take advantage of it and try to like find the loopholes, right? And we want to make sure that it's actual remote workers, digital nomads. So the most basic of it is simply, if you're somebody who works on your laptop, you're not necessarily going to be working for a company in the place you're visiting. So for example, if we look at Estonia, so Estonia has a digital nomad visa. So as long as I'm going there and I'm not working for an Estonian company and I'm just working on my laptop, you'd apply for the digital nomad visa. Every country is different. They have different requirements. Sometimes it's a small fee you pay and it just kind of formalizes it. You get the visa. For some, it might be a bit more intense in terms of like, okay, what's your income level? Can you support yourself while you're here? So it will look different for every country. But essentially, as long as you're, a remote worker, it allows for that. And again, it's a bit different from if you're an entrepreneur, that would be like a bit of a different visa situation. So this is specific for remote workers that are employees of companies.
Yeah. So one more thing, I wanted to ask, like you talked about office are not really important, but at the same time, we have noticed that people are facing a lot of mental health issues. Like they feel, alone while working remotely because there was some vibes in office, even though there was maybe a lot of work, but still you had a chat with friends, your colleagues, and you just go out and have coffee and you just have a chat in kitchen or even in washrooms, right? So we kind of missing, people are kind of missing that kind of thing also. So like some of the people, I think a lot of the people sometimes feel lonely while working from home. So how do we take care of our mental health and how do we not feel alone while working remote?
Yeah. And I think it's important to realize that working from home and working remotely are very different. Working from home means you're in the
Yeah,
confines of your home,
very
you're
true.
in that same environment. There's not much of a disconnect, especially when you
Mm-hmm.
add a pandemic on top of it. Where working remotely, again, if you look at, my personal experience, I'm working at co-working spaces with incredible
Okay.
people. I'm going to lunch with them. That's how I got my first remote job, was
Yeah, yeah.
connecting with people in those spaces,
Mm-hmm.
going to lunch, traveling. Like when I go to Bali and Canggu, there are so many remote workers. Everyone's in the same boat. They're so friendly. You're doing meetups, co-working spaces have a lot of events so you can get to know each other. So I would say that if anything, it's even better because you're connecting with people that you have aligned values with, right? When you're in
Yeah,
the office,
yeah.
it's sort of like, okay, we all work for the same company. And this way you're learning from the people you're meeting, right? So you're meeting people from different countries, different professional backgrounds. And even for me, my first year working remote, I learned so much from the people I was traveling with. And so you get to create the rules. You decide, do I work from home and stay in the same
Mm-hmm.
place?
Right, right,
Do
right.
I go to a different country? Do I go to a cafe, a co-working space? In terms of mental health, however, the pandemic has been hard for everybody. Working from home, when you have these fears, these health concerns,
Mm-hmm.
that can be a scary place. And so in that sense, it's really figuring out what works best for you. For me, I'm a runner. I love running. It just like
Mm-hmm.
really releases stress for me. I do daily gratitude. So really trying to bring focus on the good that is happening. Now I haven't done this in a while, but historically meditation has really helped. I know that it can be
Mm-hmm.
hard when there's like a lot going on, but even
Yeah.
giving yourself just 5 minutes to
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and it's really, yeah, it really depends on the person, and it depends on the intensity of what they're experiencing. I would just be really mindful of habits. So when I was on remote year, I lost a lot of my good habits. I used to like exercise all the time and I like
Yeah.
eat healthy. Went on remote year and it was like a wild ride and I just neglected self-care. And so
Mm-hmm.
now I'm very mindful of that, of like, hey, am I, losing that self-care? Am I starting to notice that I'm, not sleeping as well or eating more junk? And as soon as I notice that, I'm like, okay, no, I'm noticing a pattern, a trend here. I need to stop that because I know that, exercise, eating healthy, this all supports me in a positive way when it comes to mental health.
Makes
And
sense.
I
Yeah.
think actually I'm going to add on to that, specific to remote work, the importance of disconnecting. A lot of new people who are new to remote work, they
Mm-hmm.
think they have to be online all the time, constantly answering emails. It's like, no, when you're done your workday, you can check in with your team. Hey guys, I'm hopping offline. Just want to check in if there's anything else you need before I wrap up for the day. You don't
Yeah.
need to be on 24/7. And that disconnect is really important.
Right. Yeah, this is a good point. Very important. Yeah, totally. So, what are you curious about in terms of remote work right now? And are you like searching something like anything on remote work, like after like about the future and maybe next year?
Yeah. So what I'm noticing actually, a trend and a change that I'm starting to see just of recent. So at
Mm,
first with the pandemic, it was like, what companies are going to go remote? How are they going to adapt? And so we've
yeah,
seen
yeah.
that unfold over the last year and it continues to unfold. But now I'm noticing something specifically, I'm noticing in Canada, a lot of people who were in the service industry, so servers at restaurants, they're not going back, and there's a shortage of staff in
Mm-hmm.
these environments. So they're like, we need servers, but no one wants to work in the service industry, because people are had that opportunity to just step back from their lives,
Mm-hmm.
pause, reflect. Does this
Yeah.
serve me? Is this really what I want to do? And so I think you're going to see, well, of course, a lot more people realizing like, remote work is real. Remote work is possible. I can do
Mm-hmm.
this. So many
Mm-hmm.
people didn't really understand it or thought it was like for other people or just that it was impossible. And I think people have seen the reality of what can be possible for them. And they're taking a stand for themselves, which is incredible. They're not putting up with these, situations or
Mm-hmm.
jobs that don't serve them, toxic environments, whatever it may be. And they're realizing like, okay, what do I really want? And remote work aligns for a lot of people in that sense. So I think that's something that we'll see. again, the evolution of those digital nomad visas, what countries will embrace them. And really one thing that I'm very hyper mindful of right now are the restrictions with COVID. Okay, what countries are opening up, which ones aren't, what are the requirements for those? There was much more ease of movement before COVID. And so now it will be interesting to see as we start to reopen, as countries start to reopen, what that will look like.
Yeah, makes sense. So here's my favorite question. So what did you learn as a remote career coach, which you wouldn't have learned from anywhere else?
What I would say is that I realized as a remote career coach that people are much more talented than they give themselves credit for. So as I said before, a lot of people will come, they think they're not talented enough. They're like, I got to go get an MBA, or I got to go to, university or this or that, and like undertake all this like time and money doing this, because credentials and, paper, it makes us feel like, okay, it makes us feel worthy. But that's not it. At the end of the day, you still have to learn how to effectively communicate your value and skills to an employer. And so I see all these talented people come to me and they're so doubtful. But from my perspective and what I know, it's like, you can do this. It's just, again, how you're positioning your value, this and that. So I think that the biggest thing that I've learned is that people are more talented again than they give themselves credit for, and that this is so much more realistic and possible for people, remote work, than they believe it is.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. So what are your top 3 favorite books, like in terms of maybe remote work or life, like anything, it doesn't need to be related to work, but yeah, your top books.
So I will share, I love reading and I love books, and I have so many books I could recommend. But when it comes to people who want to work remote, I noticed one of the biggest maybe first battles or hurdles they'll face is mindset, just really believing they can do this. And so 3 books that I would recommend that really help you kind of give you that confidence to go remote. I have them here. I'll share them with you. The first one is The Big Leap. Awesome. So this one, it says, conquer your hidden fear and take your life to the next level. So this is a good one, just feeling more courageous to go after the life you want. The Obstacle is the Way, another great one. This is Ryan Holiday. And so through this journey of finding a remote job, it can be an emotional roller coaster. And a lot of times, remote job applicants will get really discouraged once they hear like so many no's, and they're just like, okay, they pause from the remote job search. Maybe it takes months, years before they revisit it again. So this will kind of help you develop that resilience and really seeing, again, the obstacle is the way. And then the last one here, The Magic of Thinking Big. So this is by David Schwartz. And again, just to really help you start thinking bigger of what's possible. Like, you can do this, you can do these great things in life, and you don't have to, play small. So for somebody starting out with wanting to land a remote job, I think those are really great books to just kind of get you in the headspace.
Are you there? Hey, Kate.
Gotcha.
I kind of lost you in the middle. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that which book was there? Third. Which was the third book which you shared? Magic of Thinking Big, right? Yeah, I read that book. It was really helpful. Yeah. Yeah. So one more question. So what are your top 3 favorite tools like while working remotely?
So I would say that the top tools that I use often, I use Zoom a lot, Google Drive, WhatsApp, I use those tools a lot. Some ones that I love. So there's this app called Crisp, and it removes background noise. But Zoom now has this feature as well, which is incredible. So in terms of that app, I would say, one of the things that has been important to me is actually like my remote work setup. So I have this laptop stand, really just helps with making sure that you have the right ergonomics when you're working from
Right.
home.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that I think a lot of people face.
Yeah.
And even just like a ring light, when we're working remote, you're on a bunch of video calls.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like a nice to have. But in terms of like my business, there's so many incredible tools I use for new remote workers. I mean, they're probably going to be using Slack a lot. It's a great
Mm-hmm.
tool to become familiar with. Zoom, Google Drive, those are like some of the basic tools that a lot of remote teams use. Again, Chris was like really cool, but now I guess Zoom has the feature, so I'm not sure
Yeah.
how relevant that will be. And probably if you can get I forget what the name was, but I had downloaded an app at one point that just converts all the time zones because I work so often
Oh,
with
yeah, that is
people
very important.
internationally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just easily converts it. It easily converts when you're connecting with other people, just makes it a lot easier because
Right,
that's going to be
right,
a big
right.
thing, time zones.
Yeah. So where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram at the Remote Nomad. So if you just go over to Instagram, I share a lot of tips and inspiration on working
Mhm.
remotely. Again, if you go to theremotenomad.com and if you go to theremotenomad.com/free gift, I have free resources there. I have a remote career playbook, remote resume checklist. I also send out weekly remote job postings of fully remote jobs, usually send out about 80 to 100 every week. So you don't have to be searching around. I'll send them right to you for free. And then soon my program, the Remote Career Accelerator, will be opening. Really powerful program supporting you through the process of how to land a remote job. There's all the training in there. We jump on group coaching calls to ensure everyone's fully supported. So if you go over to the Remote Nomad, you can get on the wait list for that once that opens.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Kate. It was really great talking to you. All the insight you have provided, like they were really helpful. So it would really help our listeners.
Awesome. It was great to be here. Thanks for having me.